All right, thank you everyone for joining our first Brinc Webinar Series. We'll be hosting this every month, and this month's webinar was with Uptin, who'll be sharing more about PR and brand story. Uptin's a good friend of ours at Brinc. He's been mentoring some of our startups in the past, so I'll leave it all to you, Uptin.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for joining. We'll get right started. So a little bit about me. I lived in New York City for 6 years, or about 7, and then I moved to Asia in 2016. So I spent 2 years in Singapore, 2 years in Hong Kong, covering tech, travel, and everything in between. And then 3 or 4 months ago, I left Hong Kong, moved to Los Angeles, and now I work with startups and helping them with their PR, their communications, coaching, and consulting as well. I also do content strategy as well for startups and some bigger tech companies as well. I love to keep these workshops interactive. So if you can just tell me in the chat box where you're calling in from. Let me see where that slide is. Yeah, so where in the world are you? I know it's we're spanning from 7 a.m. to midnight, or I guess if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's a little bit later. But tell me in the chat box where you are calling in from. And I'd also like to know what industry you are in and the role in your business. So we have Marco in Venice, Gert with Hello Door in Belgium, Sabine in Bahrain. Welcome, welcome. We have Amir in Brazil. Wonderful. We have a lot of people from Europe. And so go ahead and tell me what industry you're in as well. So Amir's in med tech. And then also I'm curious to know your role in your business. So we have Lauren, who's director of PR for product development and marketing firm in North Carolina. Okay, welcome. And okay, Italy, shared mobility and marketing. Wonderful. Okay, perfect. So we have a really nice group here, and yeah, we'll carry on. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. Again, I do like to keep it very interactive. So if you guys have questions and comments throughout, please shout out. You can speak, turn on your camera, or feel free to use the message box as well. All right. So this was a video that I did in 2017. Yeah. So this is a video I did for CNBC. And a lot of times when we talk about content in PR, we think that we need expensive DSLR equipment, lighting, and things like that. But I want to share this with you guys to show that that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's better to actually use your iPhone and do selfie mode. You can actually become a lot more relatable with your audience if you just think about creating and connecting with your audience through selfies. So this was a video I did about digital nomads, and I literally just started shooting in selfie mode on my iPhone 7, and that was it. That, you know, it ended up getting 11 million views. And I always tell people that if I were to have brought my cameraman and a DSLR and put a microphone on and everything like that, it would have probably gotten, you know, maybe 100,000 views. So again, I put this slide in here to show you guys to start thinking outside the box when you're creating your own content, and really think about, how do I make it personal? I lead a lot of workshops and I ask people, when you first joined Facebook, did you join Facebook to connect with, you know, a company? No one raises their hand. Did you join Facebook to connect with a news network? Nobody raises their hand. Did you join Facebook to connect with another person? And then it's like pretty much everyone raises their hand. So the more personality you can bring to your content, the better. So today, this morning, this afternoon, this evening, we're going to go over, why does PR matter? I'm going to teach you guys 4 secrets to creating a really solid and powerful brand story that you can use not just with journalists, but also to investors, to potential clients, and even to recruits. I'm also going to address the question of, should I even do PR? A lot of you guys are in early stage, and it might make sense to, you know, divert funds to marketing or something else. Then we'll go over how you can start, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. All right, so this is Michael Bloomberg, And he is worth $55.5 billion. There you see him on the stage of the Democratic National Convention, sorry, the Democratic presidential debate earlier this year. And he went on stage, and as you can see, he's looking a little bit awkward. And, you know, the reason I put this slide in here is to show that, you know, he's one of the richest men. He was mayor for 3 terms. He has a multi-billion-dollar company. He's valued at $55 billion, but he wanted to be president, right? Or he wanted to at least run against Donald Trump. And after the debate, this is what happened. Bloomberg's disastrous debate, a very bad night for Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg's first debate performance raises questions about his viability. And this is all to show that you can be very smart, very good at what you do, and very rich. But if you don't know how to communicate your idea, if you don't know how to communicate verbally, it could all be for nothing, right? So one reporter at CNN even broke down, and they said, okay, he spent $464 million. He got 13 minutes of speaking time. So they actually broke down to per minute on stage. He basically threw out $35 million per minute, right? He had been spending $464 million up until that point, and this was his chance to actually speak for the first time live in front of an audience and, you know, let America get to know him. And this is how much he ended up essentially throwing out, $35 million per minute. Ultimately, that ended his campaign, and that was it for him. So this is another good quote to encapsulate why we're here today. Failure to communicate effectively in business means fast road to failure. It means startups won't get funded, products won't get sold, projects won't get backing, and careers won't soar. Don't sabotage your potential because you can't communicate your ideas. And that's from a book called Talk Like TED. So the first thing we want to think about when we talk about our brand story is, how do we add value to somebody? So for instance, if I have a startup that sells, let's say, bottles, and I want to, you know, take on the single-use plastic industry, I'm not just going to say, yeah, the plastic industry is really bad, you know, we should be buying my bottles. I want to actually teach someone something. So I can say, well, did you know that 80% of single-use plastic never actually gets recycled? Example number 2, if I'm trying to scale in the country of Indonesia, and I want to tell somebody like, yeah, Indonesia is huge, right? I'm not just going to say Indonesia is huge. I want to say Indonesia is a massive country. It has a population of about 260 million people. That's the 4th largest country in the world behind US, India, and China. Obviously not in that order. And then the third one is, if I'm trying to talk about, you know, Hong Kong and the importance of social distancing and how hard it is in Hong Kong, I might say a statistic or a fact such as Hong Kong is one of the most dense cities in the world. Number 2 is be specific. So we don't want to say things like, when I was just a kid, right? We want to actually give the specific details. So instead we can replace that with, when I was just 7 years old. We don't want to say something like, it was freezing. Instead, we want to say, it was icy, snow was covering the road by the second. And then we don't want to say something like, I was broke before becoming an entrepreneur. Instead, we want to say, I had just $17 in my bank account when I bought my domain name. And now here is your opportunity. So I want you guys to improve the last one. So instead of saying, my investor was so hard on me, what's a more specific way we can convey that sentence? Go ahead and use the chat box. If everyone can kind of submit something. Obviously, you know, you can feel free to make up the details. But again, we want to think about specifics. And oftentimes when we think about specifics, we can think about, you know, something very like detailed, or even a number. If you're having trouble, think about a number that you might be able to use in that sentence. So go ahead, type something in the chat box and we'll go over them. All right, Catherine says, my investor criticized everything from our strategy to our product in less than 5 minutes. Amazing, that's wonderful. The key in Catherine's sentence is in less than 5 minutes. If she had just said, my investor criticized everything from our strategy to our product, it kind of is like, okay, maybe you're just, maybe you're just bitter, right? Raj Shah says, my investor gave me 3 months to perform. That's good. That's definitely good. I would say you can even go a little bit more specific, Raj, and think about how to, what does that mean to perform, to break even on his investment? Is it to increase sales by 300%? Right? These are questions we always want to be asking, but you're definitely on to something strong with the 3 months. So good job. Okay, cool. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to make it personal. So if I'm talking about my, growing up and whatever, instead of college was miserable for me, I can say Boston was freezing, which was super hard since I grew up in Florida. Another example, I just hated working for a big bank. Instead of that, we want to say, my boss at BNP would keep me until 1 a.m. even on Fridays. Do you see how much more powerful, making it personal is? My boss at BNP would make me stay at 1 a.m. even until Fridays, instead of just, I hated working for a big bank. And then the third one, again, I want you guys to replace is, I didn't know how to sell more units at the time. So what's a more personal way to say that? And again, use your imagination. All right, so instead of saying, I didn't know how to sell more units at the time, we can say, Valero Marco says, I was not trained enough. Yeah, that's definitely, it's kind of just saying the same thing. So you want to make it a little bit more personal. And again, think about being more specific as well. So Lauren says, with just 2 weeks of actual job experience, I didn't have a clue how to speak to customers and close sales. Beautiful. That's already really good. And then she goes on to say, it was like asking me to run a marathon when I'd never even learned to crawl. That was really good. That was really good. Do you see how she all of a sudden used a metaphor too, right? We're all of a sudden thinking about somebody running a marathon and they don't even know how to crawl. Like, oh, wow, I can relate, because she created a visual in our mind. Really nice job. Amir says, I don't feel I can fit myself in this market anymore. Yeah, again, that's a good start, but we want to think about other ways that we can be a little bit more specific. One test you can put your sentence through is, for instance, if, so remember everything that Lauren just said? Nobody, let's say that was true. Nobody else in the group chat could take Lauren's sentence and go and say it, right? That's probably only something specific to Lauren. Volvero, Raj, Amir cannot, Catherine cannot just like copy and paste Lauren's sentence and go and use it. But with Volvero or Amir's, that's probably a sentence that a lot of people can use, right? I don't feel I can fit in this market anymore. Maybe everybody, or at least half the people in this room, could potentially use that sentence, because at some point that's how they felt. So that's a really good way to test your test your brand story. Am I saying things that almost anybody could use, or even my friend, or even somebody in your own startup? If one of your colleagues or your co-founder can say that same sentence, then chances are it's not personal enough, and you need to go a step deeper. Great. So yeah, this is, again, test every line to make sure that nobody else, for instance, back to my example, Boston was cold, which was hard since I grew up in Florida. Nobody else in the room can say that. My boss at BNP would keep me till 1 a.m. even on Fridays, right? Like, maybe there's someone else in the room here that, their boss, they worked at BNP and their boss also kept them late. but the odds of that their boss kept them late even till 1 a.m. on Fridays, it's like pretty much 0%, right? So again, kind of thinking about it like a funnel. How can I be as specific and detailed and personal as possible? Cool. And then the last one is to be relatable. So I know Brinc does a lot of investment and works with a lot of startups in the future of food space. So this is the example I'll use. So imagine I have a meatless chicken nuggets, okay, and I'm trying to go into the Indian, or that's a bad example. I'm trying to go into the UK market, okay. So I can go and pitch investors in the UK, and I could start my presentation with option A. I can't believe that people in the UK are still eating so much meat. They're eating steak and burgers and chicken, and you guys are probably eating meat. And I cannot believe that you're still eating meat. It's 2020 and the animals and the environment, da, 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 da. Right? So that's option A. That's my introduction. Option B is I used to be just like you. I used to love steaks and burgers, hot dogs and chicken nuggets once, every Thursday night. But then I started to look into the impact that meat consumption was having on the environment, and that too much meat was having on my health. And then I started to learn, why I didn't want to do this anymore. Okay, so do you guys see the difference between option A and option B? Go ahead in the chat box and tell me which one, you think is going to be more effective, option A or option B. Yeah, option B, Christopher, Raj, option B, right? So that's because it's a lot more relatable, right? I'm not coming in at someone and judging them and being condescending and yeah, and the other reason too, you guys, is because all of a sudden it's like meeting somebody with empathy. I do a whole workshop on persuasion, and we want to meet people with empathy when we want to persuade them, right? If we're automatically highlighting our differences between us and them, then it's going to be a lot harder to convince someone of something we want, right? Versus if we meet somebody with empathy and say, yeah, I used to be like that, or I'm already like you, but this is what I learned, then all of a sudden the person kind of approaches us like, oh wait, you know something I don't know, you have value to provide to me, let me really humble myself and open myself up to learning what you have to express. So again, being relatable is very, very important. One example I like to use is, imagine this is one example as well. Option A is, we're a B2B AI SaaS solution for farmers that want to maximize their profits. It's like, okay, cool. Versus option B, imagine the farmer in Vietnam and the grocery store owner in Chicago. Right now, that transaction, they're losing 60% of the financials because of a third party. So what our app does is that it reduces the 60% to 10%. So the farmer gets more of his profits, the grocer has to spend less money, and it's a win-win-win, and we get 10% of the commission, right? So all of a sudden you're telling me about your startup through an example, as opposed to what you are. You're telling me kind of what you do. All right, so topic number 2 I want to go over is, should I even do PR? So these are the questions you should ask yourself. I've been a CNBC reporter for 7 years, and these are the kinds of things that I would think about if I would ever do an article or feature an early stage startup. So the question number 1 is, have you launched something yet? If the answer is no, then there's a good chance you shouldn't be doing any PR. Not necessarily, but probably you shouldn't be doing any PR, because journalists don't like to cover ideas. There's a zillion ideas. There's a zillion ideas that are in the works. They like to cover trends. They like to cover something that's disrupting, creating impact, right? Number 2 is, are you B2B or are you B2C? If you are B2B, it's going to be a little bit harder to get press. Well, I shouldn't say it's going to be harder. It's just your focus is going to be a lot more niche, right? You're going to go to a lot more business platforms, business media platforms. B2C, obviously, the net is a lot wider for coverage. And then the other thing to think about is, are your competitors in the news? I have a lot of my clients come to me and say, hey, someone at TechCrunch or Wall Street Journal just did the story on one of my competitors. Like, I wish that was me, or I would love, to be featured in a piece like this, right? And so as a PR consultant, all of a sudden I can say, okay, these are the reporters we need to be pitching. These are the angles we want to be pursuing, because clearly there is an appetite in the media landscape for stories that are like this one, right? That are like you. Obviously, this is a very kind of high level question, questions to be asking. So, everyone has a specific story. And so, but this can hopefully guide you in the right direction. All right, so why does PR matter? So this is Jason. He came to me about 3 months ago now, with an idea to start a platform that is basically a jobs board that helps people in the US find jobs that are in the public service sector. Because the federal government here in the US will completely wipe your student debt if you work in the public service sector for 10 years. So he realized like there's no jobs platform that is just allowing people to search for jobs in the public service sector. So he came to me and started working with me as my client. And this was the homepage of his website. It was, we're the nation's only jobs board dedicated to public service careers. That was the first red flag I found. Remember, people don't necessarily care about what you are or how good you are. They care about what you can do for them. One example is Walmart does not say we are the world's largest retailer. They say, Walmart, save money, live better, right? We don't care that you're the world's largest retailer, the second largest, the fifth largest, right? It doesn't really impact my wallet as a customer. But save money, live better, now I'm on board. Okay, now I want to do both, right? So same thing with back to Jason and the PSLF jobs. I told him, and we worked together on changing that from, we're the nation's only, exclusive jobs board to what does that actually mean for your end user? Become student debt free and do meaningful work. So he immediately changed the website, and then we started to go to market with a different strategy, right? A little bit more of a higher value proposition to the audience. So the next thing you want to ask yourself is, what are you pitching? When you pitch a journalist, you want to ask yourself, what is my expertise? We don't want to say, hey, this is my startup, this is what I do, this is what I want to do, right? That's not going to necessarily, that's very likely not going to resonate with the journalist. Instead, you want to ask yourself, what is your expertise? So with Jason, when I pitched him and got him on Yahoo Finance, we actually didn't pitch him as, hey, this is pslfjobs.com. This is what they're going to do, or this is what they're already doing. We actually pitched Jason as a subject matter expert. This is Jason, and he can talk about anything related to the student debt crisis. That's all of a sudden a lot more valuable to a journalist than, hey, this is Jason, can you interview him about his company, right? Do you guys see the difference there? You're becoming a subject matter expert so that you can talk about the industry. Journalists, TV producers, they're regularly looking for people who can weigh in, comment, give analysis and insight into a specific industry. Now, in this case, we pitched Jason to come on and talk about the student debt crisis. They liked his story so much that they actually ran a story just about his company, which is pretty cool. So say you want to start a PR strategy and you're wondering like, well, how do I start? I meet so many clients who start by saying, should I just publish, should I just purchase a PR newswire for $1,000 or $2,000? Or, and then all of a sudden I'll get press. And I'm like, no, that's not really how it works. Another person came to me recently and said that somebody in New York emailed them saying, hey, we can definitely get you into Forbes. Why don't we talk about, how to do your PR? We really like your company. To me, that screamed red flag. That does not, first of all, there's never, even if you spend $15,000 a month with a PR agency in New York, they will tell you we have zero guarantee of getting you placed, which is crazy, right? $15,000 a month, and they still can't guarantee that you get placed. But that's just how PR works. You do not pay for play here. So to start, say you just want to start and do something, and you don't have budget to work with a PR consultant or a PR agency. you want to start with a cold email. Well, I mean, ideally you have a contact, that already you can start with and say something like, hey, so-and-so told me to reach out, da, 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 da. But, when that's not the case, you want to have someone on your team find journalists that are covering your beat, something similar in your industry. And then you want to send an email. And then it's really important that you have a call to action at the end of the email. And your call to action should not be something as grandiose as, would you like to do a story on me? That's one of the biggest mistakes people make, is they say, let me know if you want to feature me. Let me know if, you can run a story on me. Journalists hate that. Provide value first to the journalist before you ask for a feature. So your call to action instead should be something like, can I send you an infographic? Would you have time for a 20-minute call? I could teach you more about or not teach you, but tell you more about this industry and how it's rapidly changing. Or can I send you, I mean, those two are can I send you a video that explains more about the industry, right? Obviously the video, is about you probably, but we're positioning it to teach the journalists more about the industry. So then you want to send a follow-up in, and this is actually what happened with Jason. So we sent a cold email to the Yahoo Finance producer actually. We sent a call to action of, can we send you an infographic? The infographic shares more about the student debt crisis. And the reporter said, yeah, sure, right? Do you guys understand how low the barrier is right there? For me to say, hey, can I send you an infographic is a lot easier than, will you feature my client, right? So we said, can we send you the infographic? They said yes. They liked the infographic. We said, well, next stop, can the next call to action was, let me know if you have time to speak, not to have time, but let me know if you'd like to get on a call with Jason. And they skipped that one and they said, let's just get him on the show. So there we go. So we again, this was just a cold email to a producer. Then we sent the infographic. Again, we asked, would you like a phone call with Jason? And they said, we're all good. Let's just get him live on the show. Another thing I mentioned in the second email, I said, Jason is great on camera. That's a little subtle thing that you guys can add if you are great on camera, or your founder is great on camera. Don't want to lie. But a TV producer loves that, because all the time they're juggling guests. Half of the people they're bringing on are just really, awkward or uncomfortable on camera. Half of them are great on camera. So saying something like that, or even like he's really conversational, he's really insightful. Just that little. It's like if you were applying for a job and you add that one little line like, I'm so excited about this opportunity, or like, this is my dream, like a little thing like that can really just add a little bit of frosting on the cake to you as a potential guest, or as a job hire, right? So same thing, adding something like a little, you don't want to make it a paragraph, but adding a little line of like, he's really intelligent and really knows the industry well, or he's really great on camera, he's a great conversationalist, something like that. So some of you might be saying like, well, will a cold email actually work? Yes, it will. It does. So this was the email we sent initially. It's loved this segment yesterday morning. So again, we're actually acknowledging that we already know what this journalist or producer does. We're not just saying, hi, it's not a copy and paste job, right? Loved this segment yesterday morning on the student debt forgiveness in the 12 p.m. hour. We even knew exactly what we were watching her show, right? So for us to already know that, she's much more likely to engage with us, because this email was written for her. This was not a copy and paste job, okay? So we acknowledge that we know who she is and we like what she's doing, and that this email will be relevant to her. For future segments, I'd love to introduce you to Jason, who's the founder of da-da-da-da-da, and then establish their credibility, right? He's managed more than $1.5 billion in student loan debt. And then we go into, his startup. He's created a platform which matches borrowers, and then you see our call to action. Can I send over an infographic we've created on the student debt crisis? So again, we start with acknowledging who this journalist is, that this email was written just for them. We introduce ourselves. We show our credibility immediately, right? So even if your startup is new, you have to ask yourself, what are the credentials that you can bring? He spent 7 years working at BNP Paribas or whatever, right? He spent 8 years working in the banking sector before realizing that, it's time for disruption. And then what can he bring? Again, we never say, can you do a feature on him? Can he tell you more about his platform? We just said, he can speak about the student loan government programs and proposals, as well as Biden and Trump's plans. Call to action, can I send over an infographic? And this is the infographic we made. Again, now this is one thing I love to tell people, 80-20 rule, right? Many of us have heard of this. So look at this infographic that my team created. 80% of it is just providing value. It's stats that we've researched, that we've included here, but it's 80% of this is valuable. I can tell you, if I was a reporter and I got this, I'm like, oh wow, this is making my job so easy, right? I can just pick 1.5 trillion. Okay, that's how I'm going to pitch my editor. That's what I want to include in my article, right? 80% of this is value, 20% is me selling myself. So on the top, 3/4 or 80%, we don't even mention the word PSLF jobs, right? PSLF is just the name of the program and the government program, but the company is PSLF jobs. So same thing, if you're in the agri-tech industry, ask yourself, what is an infographic that you can be making, that you put up? And this isn't just something you can send a journalist, put it on your LinkedIn, put it on your Instagram, right? But this is a really good thing to kind of go fishing for with journalists and say, hey, can I send you an infographic about the industry? And then, a lot of journalists are going to say, sure, why not? There's no barrier to entry. Like, I want to learn more, right? So this was the infographic that we used and sent out to a lot of reporters. So the average report, I was getting at least 30 to 60 emails a day of pitches. The vast majority of them were mass emails. So it just went delete, 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 right? So to stand out from the noise, you want to think about, how do I acknowledge the journalist personally, right? Hey, I loved that recent article you did. I loved that segment that you guys had on your show. Something like that. It's much better, quality over quantity, you guys. It's much better to send 10 of those emails than 200 mass emails. It's much, much better. And so again, going over what we analyzed from that email I showed you, it's like, you want to make it super short. Most emails are too long. You want to give name, titles, and credentials very quickly. And number 3, this one's really important, is leave them wanting more, right? I noticed I didn't send a huge blurb about PSLF jobs. I didn't say, go to my website, watch my video, go to my Instagram and follow my Twitter, right? Just leave them wanting more. We just literally said, can I send you an infographic? And that was it. You're all of a sudden going to be a lot more intrigued than if we just gave you everything. And it's counterintuitive, right? You think you want to provide all the information so that they can take what they want. But it's like sales, right? You have to seduce a little bit. Okay. So this is my program. Now, so I know a lot of, startups, they don't have necessarily budget for a PR agency, right? For $5,000 or $3,000 a month on retainer. And so this is the program I created, which basically allows you, we do one-on-one personal coaching. So it's just working with me directly, honing in on your brand story so that you can go to market with that across, media, across investors, across sales. And some of my clients have said, I came to you for just the media part, but now I use the things you've taught me with my investors, and I got my biggest, client because of, just using things that I practiced with you. So as part of, there's a couple different options, but as part of some of my coaching, we go over brand story, media training. And then if you want to do podcasts, whether it be interviewed on podcasts or host podcasts, we do all of that as well. And then, so that's part 1. Part 1 is really honing in on you, your message, your brand story. Part 2 is the media outreach. So what I do in the program is I actually will write press releases for you and create a media kit for you. And then actually, tell you exactly, someone on your team will train someone on your team exactly what they need to do the outreach yourself. So as opposed to spending X dollars per month indefinitely to have a PR strategy, you can actually do PR internally, and you're kind of good to go for life, really. So if you are interested or you want to learn more about that, please email me and we can do a 20-30 minute consultation. And even if you just want to pick my brain and you don't have budget, that's totally fine. because you guys are part of the Brinc community, I do offer, free consultations. So please email me. I'm also online on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all of that on Twitter at Uptin. So please connect, especially on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn because maybe right now you're not ready to do something, but maybe in 6 months you'll be really ready to hit the ground and come up with a media strategy. And so would love to connect. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. So feel free to type it in the chat box, and or even better, if you want to turn on your camera and just or even your audio and ask, that would be great too. Okay, so Lauren asks, what do you find is essential to include in a media kit for a startup? Okay, good question. So in general, I'll be honest with you. I think press releases, obviously you'll put your press releases in there, and you'll put your assets. I think a lot of times people think too much about their media kit, and in reality, it's like put the essentials, right? So like in this client's example, we put the infographic, obviously. We put some of their video content, some photo content, and then their press releases. So to ask me what is essential, I would say again, you want to treat every reporter as as their own individual, as their own audience. So there's really no one size fits all. It kind of depends on what the campaign is, what assets you have. Do you have B-roll? Like if I'm going back to my chicken nugget example in the UK, if I have examples of my factory or my production facility in which I'm creating this plant-based chicken, say I have 40 videos of B-roll, of footage, that's something I want to include in my media kit, right? Where I can just say video. And then as a journalist, as a TV producer, maybe I'm a video journalist, then all of a sudden this potential pitch is going to be a lot more valuable to me because it's like, oh, they already have video that I can use. That'll be really good to use on TV or in my video. So I think it really just depends, Lauren, on the example. Lauren, actually, maybe if you don't mind, oh, she says, generally I've done release photo videos if they're valuable. In the crowdfunding world, I'm lucky to have that much to work with unless I create more assets myself. Yeah, exactly. And that doesn't surprise me, right? If you're in the crowdfunding stages, chances are you don't have a lot of assets. And I think that's okay. I think that's when you have to get creative and ask yourself, like, ooh, is this something where I want to create an infographic on the industry, right? I think that's super valuable. I think in general, if you are an early stage startup or you're working with an early stage startup, I think that you don't need to create a media kit just for the sake of it, right? It can actually look maybe not it can actually, I wouldn't say hurt you, but it doesn't look great if I'm a reporter and I open up your media kit and all I see is like a photo and a press release that you've launched, right? It's like, okay, like you're not quite at the stage of needing a full media kit. So so don't like with the Yahoo Finance and other journalists I've worked with, I actually don't send them a media kit, like unless it's needed, right? Because that's another thing. As a journalist, if I say, hey, send me the footage, I just want the footage. Usually I don't necessarily want a folder where I have to comb and dig through stuff. So don't create media kits just for the sake of them. I think media kits are something that it's like, once you have enough assets, that's something you want to think about wrapping it all into one.
So Upton, this is Lauren speaking. I figured out this might be a little easier here. So that's super insightful, because obviously we create media kits mostly for internal organizations. So that way, if somebody, if a journalist asks for photos, I'm not now digging through our hundreds of selects that we combed through when we built out their campaign page. I'm building through the top 20 photos that I thought really told the story well, a mix of product and lifestyle shots and anything that I might be able to then quickly send over a top 3. And we are labeling them media kits, but generally you would advise then just having that be more of an internal organization place, and then sending, assets as requested?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Again, as a journalist, I think in general, yeah, at the very late stages of working on a story, what you said, it cannot hurt. If the reporter has if the reporter is very likely, if it's a very hot lead, right, and they're very likely to run a story, then at that point, sure, send them the media kit with 20 photos, and I think that's a great idea. But I think in honestly, for a pitch, I wouldn't be sending media kit even in that initial conversation, because again, the journalist wants to be thought of as unique, right? And so asking yourself, well, what does this journalist want, right? It starts with just a conversation, then maybe it graduates to an infographic or a video link, right? Like, hey, they just put out a video explaining the industry. Here it is, but to get a whole media kit is just overwhelming. It overwhelms the senses, right? We're constantly, not just journalists, everyone right now is inundated with information overload. And so asking yourself, even though, again, we think that it's a good idea to send a media kit because it's like, okay, here you go, here's everything you might need, but actually it just becomes distracting. It becomes like, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Do they just send this to everyone? That's how I think of it as a journalist. So I would say, have your media kit, have your photos, that's all great, but only send it, in that home stretch of doing a story. Because otherwise too, I can tell you also, as a journalist, I really appreciated when I would be like, hey, I need a photo for this article, ideally something where the person is, where it shows a person using the app or whatever, right? I would actually much rather prefer them replying to me with 1 or 2 photos, like, how about these, than sending me a link to a media kit. And again, it sounds counterintuitive, but I don't necessarily want to click on the link and scroll through. I want to feel like I'm, being kind of taken care of, and there's a nice liaison for me.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, great question. Okay, so Christopher Lee says, will there be any differences you spotted regarding the PR in Hong Kong and PR in the US? Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot I could say on that. The first thing is I've noticed a lot more PR people, not so much PR people, but a lot of times companies in Asia will ask for the questions in advance before an interview, and in the US, companies will never do that. So that's just kind of maybe cultural, but one thing to note from that is never, ever, ever, ever ask a reporter for the questions in advance. That's not what journalism is. It's not like, here's the questions I will be asking you. Please answer them once I hit the record button. That's not, that can actually really offend a journalist. So definitely, don't say that to a journalist. The other differences I'll say I spot is, in general, the US journalists will, in my experience, tend to scrutinize a little bit more and dig a little bit deeper, versus in Asia, they're not necessarily going to be as aggressive, and it might be a little bit more what you expect your interview to be like. In Asia and Hong Kong, you might expect an interview to go a certain way, and it likely will, versus in the US, you want to prepare a little bit more because they could be kind of a little bit more, like I said, just a little bit more challenging. But in terms of reaching out to journalists, I think it's pretty much the same. You want to, the most important thing, if you leave with one thing from today's session, it's you want to, really acknowledge that reporter's work. Hey, I loved your article last week on blah, 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 blah. For future stories you're working on, I would love to share more information about my startup or whatever, or so and so. That I think is kind of the same across the US and Hong Kong or Asia. Okay, so Christopher asked, could you give me a quick comment on the company description? It's a startup I'm running to support students' internship through online courses co-created by industry-leading companies. WorkXP empowers students with the ability to gain online work experience from industry-leading companies. So again, so I'll read that again. WorkXP empowers students with the ability to gain online work experience from industry-leading companies. So Christopher, can you turn on your microphone? And I want to know, I want you to say that more conversationally. So you met someone at a bar, you're telling me about WorkXP. What does it do?
So WorkXP, I say it's an online video course platform that will provide practical real-world experiences that students might need when they apply for the first job or the internship when they're in the college. So especially when they can already obtain those practical, skills throughout online courses, it might be better for them to have the certificates and that the skills that the real companies will actually want for those student interns that will come into their companies actually have.
Okay, great. So immediately Chris's description leaves my brain trying to paint a picture, right? So he says we give students online work experiences online. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, is it like a simulation of some, an intern sitting in a conference room with an executive saying, hey, fill out this spreadsheet? Is it saying, hey, go get me coffee? Is it somebody just like, is it a video module where you feel like you're part of a corporate meeting in a boardroom? Like, my brain is kind of scrambling to fill in the blanks, right? He said something, he's described it, he told me what it is, but he didn't show me what it is. And that's a problem, right? Because it's right now, if I got an email like this as a journalist, I'm just going to be like, well, I don't know what it is, delete, and I'm going to move on to the next one. So now I want you to try that again, Chris, but give it to me in a story, a use case. Imagine, Jessica, she's 20 years old. She only has classroom experience. Work XP allows her to, like, what is that? Give me the use case.
That's tricky. So WorkXP allows her to obtain the knowledge that she will need in upcoming internship opportunities in, let's say, Facebook. And she will get to have the course provided by Facebook that teaches her with relevant marketing skills and how to reach out to public with proper PR skills.
Better, but still not there. So give me one more example where you describe the marketing skills. Like, how is she actually learning? Is she on Facebook, live classes?
She will learn from the expertise in Facebook as a marketing official from the online courses provided by WorkXP, also co-created by the official.
Perfect. Okay. Well, not perfect, but it's getting there. So do you see the difference? Do you see the difference? The thing is, we want to dumb it down. In general, like, dumb stuff down. We think that we want to talk in very professional language and stuff, but actually they found that the most effective business language is like 5th grade reading level. And they've looked at presidents too. I think Obama spoke at a 5th or 6th grade reading level. Trump spoke at a 4th grade reading level. These are the ranges we want to actually speak at. We think that by using industry leading companies that, we're going to actually add status to our brand, but sometimes we actually just lose our message completely. So really scrutinize every word in your description. So WorkXP empowers students with the ability to gain online work experience from industry-leading companies. Again, instead of industry-leading companies, maybe he could say from companies include like Facebook and Google or whatever, like asking ourselves, how can we really, like we talked about earlier in this session, be specific, be detailed, things like that. And then always give someone a use case. Again, remember about my farming example. I can say AI, SaaS, B2B, right? Or I can just say, like, imagine the farmer in Vietnam and the grocer in Chicago. Right now, 60% of their revenue is 60% of financial transaction goes to a third party. We want to get that down to 10. Boom, right? It's like, oh, okay, I get it. You showed me, you haven't told me. So constantly be thinking about that.
Yeah. Just a quick question. Is a very huge concern between choosing, so if I want to add some details in this description, company details, then in terms of the example that you just proposed, then I would have to include more of the product description, not the company vision that we just, has titled in our original version.
Yeah, it depends. It depends. I mean, if I'm a journalist and you're pitching me for the first time, then I think we do want a company description. We don't really care about your vision, right? First, I have to understand what you are, and then maybe I'll get on board with your vision. the thing is, in general, visions are very like high level, right? They're not they don't have a lot of substance, right? For a journalist, right? Like everyone on the street, walking down the street has a vision for something. So of course, every company or startup will have a vision, but I want to know what you do, how you're likely to remember, think about it just like you would an investor. Ultimately, an investor wants to create impact and make money, right? So what does a journalist want? They want to cover the story before their competitors do. They want their editor to say, hey, good job finding that story. That was a good one. That was interesting, So to do that, they're thinking about which startups are disrupting the market and likely to be really big in a couple years, right? Most journalists in business, that's what they're thinking. So a vision is not going to entice them, but a description might, right? That's how I would think about that.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure. And that's not to say you can't tell them about your vision, during the interview or in an email later or in a media kit or press release. But for now, you only get really one shot to really give them your description. You have to make it good. Okay, Catherine, if you want to turn on your microphone too, that would be great. So Catherine asks, what news organizations are best to reach out to? Is it worth reaching out to smaller, more local papers, or is it better to focus on national business-oriented TV shows and papers? Catherine, do you want to elaborate on what you're working on?
Yeah, I'm a marketing intern for a startup that connects job seekers with industry insiders to help them connect and gain connections and eventually get a job at the company, hopefully.
Okay, and where are you guys based?
We're remote right now because of COVID, but the company is based in San Francisco.
Okay, cool. So yeah, for an example like that, to answer her question, it depends on the startup. Some people should only be reaching out to local media. Some should, be doing all. And usually in PR, we consider like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Tier 1 is your Wall Street journals. Tier 2 is your maybe lower tier, and then your tier 3s are websites, local papers that most of us have never heard of, but they're still getting good audience or fairly good audiences. So in a case like Catherine's, you want to come up with a couple different angles, and this is what PR can ultimately do is okay, what's an article that the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg or Forbes would likely do on this startup, Catherine? Like what's an angle that a big publication might do?
I think they probably focus on trends instead of like a specific startup, probably job losses in the coronavirus pandemic, and we could like comment on that.
Exactly. Beautiful. So yeah, the Forbes, the Wall Street Journals, they're going to look at the massive, macro trends, right? Job losses of COVID-19, Gen Z entering the workforce. I'm seeing a ton of stories now, start to percolate around the Gen Z and how they're in trouble and they can't get jobs, right? And so these are the angles that Catherine can be looking at. And again, it's so easy to just find, 10 articles about job losses in COVID-19, Gen Z, whatever. And then all of a sudden she has 10 reporters she can pitch, right? Because it's like, hey, I loved your article on blah, blah, blah for future stories. Here I am, here is my team, right? And then, but there are like, I was talking to somebody in the Brinc community who's based in Malaysia, and he is working with the Malaysian government and farmers right now. And it's like, yeah, that he should not be wasting his time with Forbes in New York City and Wall Street Journal in New York, right? He should be looking at, getting on Channel News Asia and Singapore and the Straits Times, and the Business Times, the Singapore publications, the Kuala Lumpur publications that I couldn't name one of them, right? But that for somebody like that, like that's going to be a really big asset, is to spend 80% of his time getting in Malaysia and Singapore publications, maybe Hong Kong too, right? Because it's closer. But, a lot of time should not be spent for somebody like him, going to the New York, the US based media. A little bit can, but in general, like, don't waste your time. Versus Catherine, is a little bit different. I would say Catherine can definitely pitch the big scale with what she just said. And then some of the smaller scale too, she might want to find like, okay, our founder is from Milwaukee, and why don't I go to the Milwaukee, the local newspaper and the stations in Milwaukee too, and try and say, hey, this guy grew up in Milwaukee and now just raised $20 million, $5 million, whatever, you know, that's definitely something that, you know, that she can pursue because it's definitely an interesting story. But obviously the angle is different, right? You're not pitching the same angle to the local and the national papers. And then the other thing too, you guys, to think about is local news stations. There's a lot of, you know, local stations in cities around the US. They're kind of usually very hungry for guests. And now that everything's on Zoom, they can take almost anybody. So ask, you know, obviously you can't just pitch everyone at like the local Fox and NBC around the country with your story. You want to kind of customize it to why it's important to San Diego, why it's important to Houston, a little bit, but you know, that's definitely something that you can try and do, and something that you can think about.
Thank you so much.
Was that, yeah, sure. All right, well, I know we're about at time, so I want to thank you guys. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for setting this up, and thank you to Brinc for having me. And again, please keep in touch on LinkedIn, Instagram, and also my email is me@uptin.co. So do send me an email if you want to continue the conversation and connect. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your evening, afternoon, or for me, morning. It's 8 a.m. And yeah, talk soon and be well. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Upton, and thank you everyone for joining our first webinar series. And we'll be hosting more of these over the months to come. So I'll hopefully see you guys there on the next ones. All right, have a good day.
All right,
Bye.
thanks.